So you hear a lot like, "Oh, I'm spiritual, but just not religious." Or maybe you say altogether like, "I'm not religious." But this is kind of like the God topic where just like it's technically impossible to not believe in God, it's also technically impossible to not be religious and here's why. Like first off, religion comes from the root ligament, or like what binds things together, and which is to do again. So religion is just the habits and rituals we do repeatedly to bind us together as a culture, and especially in relation to how we find our ultimate meaning. And we do those things whether we're conscious of it or not. Like, yes, religion can look like lighting incense and chanting prayers, but it can also look like the TV shows and news segments you watch every night that program you to think a certain way, or the way that you're conditioned to just go to school, go to college, get an office job, have a family, and so on. Like, these are all part of your religion. And I know that when people say, I'm not religious, what they mean is I don't believe in spirits or go to church or services or things like that. But I think what it really means is that you're just unaware of how you're religious. Like, your religion is just subconsciously being ingrained in you by whatever's most popular in culture, likely. There's this entire book by John McWhorter, who's a black liberal atheist. There's not many of those around. And but he has this book. It's called, I can't remember what it's called. I'll try to put it in the notes. But it's about how a lot of modern agnostic and atheistic people have become just as religious as fundamentalist Christians, and a lot of people have made politics their new religion. And then you have the spiritual but not religious people, and that can range from pretty sciencey folks who just believe there's got to be something out there to music festival hippie crystal type folks. And believe me, I'm pretty hippie, but I kind of have a love-hate relationship with more hippie people because so many of them are just so irresponsible and unaware of how much they're inconveniencing others. I used to live with a bunch, and I legit had one tell me once they couldn't pay their share of rent because Mercury was in retrograde or something like that, and it'd throw off their vibe. And I just had countless experiences like that. So I really got a kick out of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood when Brad and Leo keep complaining throughout the whole movie about these goddamn hippies. I feel it. But anyway, I think the spiritual but not religious is just code for saying, like, I do whatever I want whenever I want without any form of accountability. And I know I said earlier, like, cherry picking, everyone's cherry picking what they believe, so why not just pick what seems best to you? And isn't that the same thing? But I don't think it is, because if you're at least committed to a religious tradition on a substantial level, you're at least picking and choosing from a treasure chest of ancient wisdom that, again, is likely mixed with things that are either wrong or maybe just irrelevant. But I think we're doing ourselves a massive disservice if we're not deeply rooted in the past somehow. It's kind of like training wheels, and there's too much of a tendency in the modern world to think that all these people throughout history, they're just dumb, uneducated, superstitious rubes, but now we live in an age of reason and enlightenment, and we don't need any of that religious stuff anymore. So I do think it's important to devote yourself to a religious tradition of some kind to draw from and learn from, and maybe even like help pull that tradition into the future. A good analogy might be like being spiritual but not religious is kind of like seeing how messed up society is. So you just go out into the wilderness and say, I'm going to start a new society, and you're starting from ground zero with no resources, and that's just not practical. Like, why not look at the society you're in, take it with all the good, the bad, the ugly, and try to fix problems and move it forward into the future with all the resources that are already there. And maybe this is because of my experience with the Eastern Orthodox Church, but I've just seen how much of a difference it makes to be intentional about your worldview and your rituals and your celebrations and all of that. My wife and I went to an Orthodox church from 2017 to 2022, and we never converted. A lot of that was during the time that I was pretty full-blown nihilistic, but I still went because I knew there was something there, and it was so grounding. And then it was also a lot of that's the pandemic, and it's like, oh my gosh, I just need to see humans. And I'll always be thankful both to Orthodoxy as a whole and to that particular Orthodox parish, because they really kept my soul alive, and I had a fantastic experience there. And I'd even fantastic. It's relative, I guess, because I'd just begrudgingly sit through liturgies, just like railing in my mind against God and my lot in life. But the beauty of the liturgy just always seemed to dissipate the negativity in me. There's just something powerful about hearing all these chants and prayers that Christians have been doing for 2,000 years and tapping into something so much bigger than yourself, and it's so immersive and sensory too. Like literally all five senses are stimulated. You go in and you touch the candles and you light them and you put them in the sand and you touch the icons and the priest's robes and you hear the liturgy being sung. The entire liturgy is sung, and you see all the paintings on the walls. You smell the incense. You taste the communion bread and wine and the fellowship meal afterwards, and there's just no sort of atheistic or agnostic organization that comes anywhere near to that type of fully immersive experience and community life. And I don't want to get too much into like why I never converted to Orthodoxy, but long story short, like Orthodox people get super invested in Orthodoxy and like all the history and council and hierarchy, and like that just consumes most of the gatherings, and more of the Jesus-y Sermon on the Mount type stuff gets put on the back burner. But I'm way more interested in the like moral, transcendent, mystical elements of religion and even Orthodoxy than like the historic elements. So now we sort of go to an Anglican church. The people at this Anglican church are more like-minded as my wife and I, like more into the arts and community service, and are more okay and open to like mystery and doubt and questions. But the actual church services are more evangelical and sermon-based with just a dash of liturgy, and that's kind of hard for us to sit through. So a lot of times my wife and I will just go in between services to talk to people, then leave, and then we go to one of the church small groups at a different time, because that's where like more of the community happens. Because the actual Sunday morning services, they don't even do communion, and that's a big thing for me. Like they do the like go up front and get a wafer and some wine thing, but like who are we fooling? Like that's not the Lord's Supper. That's not even food. Maybe I've just been spoiled by because any of the Christian groups that I've been involved with ever since leaving evangelicalism, 13 years ago, everything I've been involved with, they do a communion meal after the service, because that's like the core ritual of Christianity. So it's been a bit of a culture shock to go somewhere that doesn't do that, and where people maybe hang for like 15 minutes after the service, then go home. But everything's give and take, and you just have to try to not force everything to go how you think it should go, and try to be helpful and not have it revolve around you. Because even with all this being said, I'd encourage all people, and especially young people, and especially young men in particular, to get involved in some kind of religious group, even if you don't believe all their claims, or even most of them. Like just be a part of something bigger than yourself that's making you consider the big picture and the human condition, and pushing you to something higher, and giving you an opportunity to serve others and not think about yourself as much. You might just be like me, where you think there's got to be some kind of meaning and purpose and some kind of benevolent force or being that wants us to connect, like connect with him or connect with each other or something like that. And if you can just take that step of faith and get involved somewhere that aligns with your values closely enough, I think it'll make you better, and it'll make the world better, and it'll make you spiritual and religious too. This is a clip from my story on why Christianity and atheism didn't work out for me. So if you want to watch the full video, you can click on the link here.